Our actions not only affect us, they affect those around us as well. Therefore, it is very important to consider our actions before proceeding with the impulses. Ignorance of the specifics of outcomes is not an excuse either. When we are made aware of active problems and potential problems, we are burdened with the responsibility to understand those problems and the solutions they require. In the HBO miniseries Chernobyl, the outcomes following those poor decisions are a strong reminder that nature does not owe us any breaks for our ignorance, and especially not for our recklessness. When we create additional problems from the problems we ignore, we have no merit to throw our attitude around at anyone, nor anything. Join me as we continue to learn the life lessons taught. Welcome back to this special edition of the Life Lessons series. I want to point out that as we are roughly halfway through this series, it is important to acknowledge that not all of the scenes and character presentations in this miniseries actually happened during the actual incident. While this series is based on a true story, I believe it is just as important for us to recognize what actually did happen. Therefore, I encourage you to take the time to research this for yourselves. Some resource links are available in the description. With that, let's begin with the lessons in episodes 3 and 4 of the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. Number 1. Stay away from those who are only interested in hiding problems instead of resolving them. In a phone call between Mr. Shorbina, Mr. Gorbachev, and Professor Legasov, Legasov at one point requested a reconsideration about the exclusion zone, concerned it was not wide enough considering the spread of the radioactive byproducts of the nuclear fuel across the land. Gorbachev sternly warned Legasov that the only purpose of his presence in Chernobyl is to stop the fuel from causing any more negative effects. Furthermore, Gorbachev sternly expressed that he did not want questions, but to know when the whole issue would be over. Professor Legasov answered the question, but it was not the answer Gorbachev wanted to hear. And because of this, Gorbachev hung up without any further conversation. One thing that can boil anyone's blood when they are trying to help someone solve a problem is when they do not listen to reason and common sense. Many of us human beings have a bad habit of wanting problems we engineered to go away without any further incident or any other accountability. Some of us do not even apply the lessons taught from such incidents. Impatience and a negative tone of voice from those in charge is insensitive, irresponsible, and counterproductive in situations like this. Humble yourself and pay attention to what those trying to help you are saying, especially when they know what they are talking about. Remember, when you oversee operations, the accountability is on you, whether you understand it or not. That accountability also includes who you choose to deal with those issues, both the right decisions and the stupid ones. Furthermore, hiding a problem is not going to solve it. In fact, that decision only helps the problem to manifest into an even bigger problem. To reiterate the opening narration of Seconds from Disaster, quote, "Disasters don't just happen, they are triggered by a chain of critical events," end quote. Always take a hard, objective look at every decision you make, and honestly consider if you did everything you were supposed to, or if you just did what you wanted and disregarded the warnings. Life always has ways of informing you what you don't know, so put down that ignorance card. Trying to hide a problem is not related to ignorance anyway. Decisions like that are actually related to recklessness. Life does not owe you the answers you want to hear. It never has, and it never will. Going against nature's purpose is one of the most foolish decisions you can ever make. When it comes to nuclear power, sure, the materials generate heat, which we use to make steam to drive a turbine to generate electricity. In that process, it makes those atoms very unstable. They themselves, by nature, want to settle down, and this is done by them emitting radiation. So if we are going to do this, we need to treat the technology, those atoms, with the utmost of respect. The same can be said among us humans. As we work in our fields of occupation, the employer often sets quotas we need to meet. That can be stressful considering all the variables and obstacles, which in turn can cause us to become unstable. We need to be able to have time to settle down. While we might not emit ionizing radiation, our spirits can emit energy that can affect others. Even our own attitudes can cause others to become unstable. If we want people to work with us, we need to treat them with respect. Whether it is a natural resource or a living being that breathes, the concept of interaction remains the same: respect. Excommunicating from others just because they won't lie to you or they won't give you the answer you want does not change the reality. That only shows how childish you still choose to be. Plus, you limit yourself from people who can actually help you once you finish that phase known as denial. When you earn mistrust, it is a steep uphill journey to earn points to retract it. Number 2, suppressing the truth is not eternal and is a waste of resources. During a conversation between Mr. Sherbina and Professor Legasov outside, Sherbina gestured to Legasov to look to his side, to which he recognized 2 individuals he met before at the hotel bar. It turned out these 2 individuals were part of the KGB, whose acronym translated to English is the Committee for State Security. Their duty throughout the Chernobyl incident within the film was making sure no additional word of the disaster went beyond the investigative committee. In another scene, Ms. Komyuk was visiting Hospital Number 6 in Moscow to obtain witness testimonies of what happened at the power plant before and after the explosion of the reactor. While traveling to another room, she caught sight of a woman in physical contact with one of the firefighters who suffered severe radiation exposure and was deteriorating. Taking swift action, she removed the woman from the ward and reprimanded her. She continued the reprimand toward one of the hospital nurses, particularly for allowing this visitor to be that close to the hospital patient without any protective clothing. Ms. Komyuk then threatened to go public with this breach in protocol. Just then, 2 men confronted Ms. Komyuk, and they asked sternly what she meant by what everyone was going to hear. Long story short, these men were KGB officers, and Ms. Komyuk was arrested. While it is understandable that we do not want details of an issue to reach ears that may use that information with malicious intent, we also have an accountability not to withhold details with malicious or reckless intent. This includes classifying critical information for the purpose of looking more innocent than we actually are. Accountability is further invoked when we do not fix problems properly and instead try to hide them. As mentioned before, hiding a problem does not resolve it. It only makes it worse. It generates more stress on ourselves as it increases paranoia, fear, and the severity of potential consequences. There are those that continue in dysfunctional tendencies and hope for the best. But the reality is, hope is not a strategy for survival. The only way we can free ourselves from the stress of a problem or a fault is to acknowledge it and apply the required corrections. The amount of resources we waste trying to hide problems is irresponsible, selfish, and foolish. It is unreasonable that we try to do everything else except what we should be doing. So why do we do this? One of the most common reasons is simple. Some of us just don't like being told what we cannot do. Even when it's reality telling us as clear as day, some of us continue to rebel against reality and any other forms of the natural flow of life and reason, all for the sake of our pride. Now, some of you will argue this is human nature. That is true. But here's what you are neglecting to acknowledge. Human nature does not have the authority to override reality. And that also includes consequences. Therefore, our best option to avoid a date with reality on its bad side related to accountability is to keep our human nature in the proper order. You have been warned. Number 3, be respectful and truthful to everyone, especially those with nothing to lose. In the scene where the miners were called to action at the mining site, the crew chief asked where they would be going when instructed to board the large trucks. Upon being told by the Minister of Coal the location is classified, the crew chief stood his ground along with his crew, warning that once the soldiers run out of ammo, the remaining miners would have the upper hand and give them and the minister an old-fashioned beatdown. One soldier commented they could not be talked to in that attitude, to which the crew chief responded with,
"Shut the fuck up!"
The Minister of Coal then proceeded to tell them all that he was told about the situation, including the location. After that, the miners agreed to go to Chernobyl. In another scene in which the crew chief met with Mr. Sherbina and Professor Legasov to discuss the labor, Legasov was advised by Sherbina to be upfront with the miners and refrain from mind games with them. The crew chief was very logical and firm when discussing the labor plans, even with Legasov. This may seem like a no-brainer, but I'm sure many of you watching this video have plenty of stories of your experience with people trying to gaslight you into doing what they want. Some of you watching may even be engaging in gaslighting right now. This lesson basically shows some of the consequences related to such actions. Eventually, people will get tired of the bullcrap thrown at them, and they will defend themselves by whatever means to stop the threat. Sometimes it's as simple as boycotting or walking away. Other times, it may escalate beyond that. Provoke at your own risk, which is heavily discouraged. When summoning people for help, the worst way to express it is with a demanding tone, as if you somehow have or even want an upper hand against them. Furthermore, withholding key details from them and bringing them up much later in critical times is irresponsible, insensitive, and inexcusable. Remember, whatever you are in charge of, you are burdened with the accountability thereof, whether you understand the operation or not. Therefore, your best course of action is to put it all on the table with those you consult. Once you damage the trust beyond repair, they will not work with you any longer, and for good reason. Number 4, the impact of misconduct has no bounds. With the amount of devastation by radiation from the explosion of the reactor, several projects of cleanup were necessary. There was a necessity to bury land under itself, decontaminate houses, and also put down any animals, both feral and domesticated. There was also the need to build a sarcophagus around the reactor building to contain the radiation emitted from it once and for all. During the process of needing to scoop core material back into the reactor hall from the roof, robots were attempted at first, but the amount of radiation rendered the tech inoperable. Humans had to take their place, known as liquidators. Many were drafted in and could only work on the roof for no longer than 90 seconds. Any longer and the exposure of the radiation would have been far worse. As for those who had already died from acute radiation sickness, in the film, it showed that their burial was far from routine. Their bodies were sealed in metal coffins that were welded shut. Upon being placed in the ground, the coffins were surrounded by cement. This was to help prevent any remaining radioactive contamination from reaching into the ground. For the animals, they were dropped in and then surrounded by cement. When we make the wrong decisions and they manifest into catastrophe, others around us end up suffering, sometimes worse than we suffer. You may be asking, what could anyone suffer that is either greater than or equal to radiation poisoning in this day and age? How about misunderstandings and discrepancies between human beings that escalate to long-term quarrels? Other historical incidents from a technical perspective are those such as the Space Shuttle Challenger, the Deepwater Horizon, the oil refinery explosion in Texas, just to name a few. If you need an even bigger example, how about war? To bring it even closer to home, when some people in intimate relationships make the wrong decisions, their families may end up suffering. If they have offspring, they suffer several episodes of stress. This scenario is a topic within itself, but a lot of the problems can be traced back to the lessons within this video and even the previous. Human aura of negativity can create an environment of physical and psychological poison that can spread everywhere, and it actually is, even today. Therefore, you must protect yourself at all times, not only from other people's negativity, but also from your own. Therefore, Chernobyl not only teaches about the necessity to respect technology, it also teaches the necessity to respect life. Not just humans, but all forms of life, as well as the very materials we use to craft things for our survival and innovation. The moment we allow ourselves to shift into selfishness, we put ourselves on the path to repeat the history of self-destruction. That'll complete this installment of the series, and I invite you to stay tuned for the final one. It will be packed, so prepare yourselves. Are there lessons you learned in these 2 episodes of Chernobyl? By all means, please share them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and haven't done so already, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also be sure to activate notifications to be informed of the next productions to be released. Life is full of lessons. Although we might not be perfect, we are capable of improvement. So until next time, stay wise and stay committed to personal development.